Today we're looking at the top 10 Pokemon to use for a playthrough in Emerald. And we're just gonna get straight into it. So at number 10, we have Sceptile. Now, Sceptile is the region's grass starter, and it's the first in the series with a truly solid offensive build. It's also kind of like the first grass sweeper ever. And so of course, with high speed and special attack, this allows it to make really good use of its grass moves in, a region with quite a bit of water. It's useful for a ton of fights in the game, and overall, of course, its biggest thing going for it is availability. And availability is actually one of the biggest things that can contribute to a Pokemon being good for a playthrough. And that's because the earlier a Pokemon comes, the more opportunities it has to provide benefit to beat the game. And so of course, one of any starter's benefit is that they come at the very start. However, there is more to it than just availability. Swampert and Blaziken are available at the exact same time, but they're going to rank higher on this list. I'm also giving away 10 copies of my upcoming Pokemon Emerald ROM hack to subscribers, and if you want to know how to enter, just watch to the end. So what is it then that makes Trico less good than the other two? Well, the biggest issue with Trico is its performance from the 2nd to 6th gym. The problem is that it gets 20 power absorb at level 6 and doesn't get a stronger move until 29 with Leaf Blade. Now, absorb is enough to get by in the early game, and grass type is obviously great for the first gym, but that's really where Trico falls off. Because the line has a low defense, high special attack stat spread, healing doesn't work that well for it. Healing moves work a lot better when you have high defense, and this line really wants a strong grass move early. And we see this start to be an issue as early as the 2nd gym. It really becomes a problem in the 3rd gym, however, where despite having electric resistance, Grovyle just can't do any damage. The 4th gym is fire, so it's understandably bad here too. And it even struggles in the 5th gym. Grovyle should have Leaf Blade here, but given its low defense, the bulkier normal types here just give it more trouble than you'd hope. And then after that, you've got a flying gym. So the early game is overall pretty rough for Trico. And it's really only in the Tate and Liza fight where this line has its second, what I would call, great fight. First of all, Sceptile has stab super effective coverage against 3 of the 4 Pokemon. And when you factor this with it resisting Cladle's Earthquake, it's overall a very good pick. And then similarly, as we move towards the 8th gym with Juan, Sceptile does pretty good here too. It can solo pretty much anything except for the Ace, which is kind of annoying. That's because Kingdra has Ice Beam and is a Dragon type, but being able to beat 4 Pokemon on a gym leader's team is still pretty good. It also does fine through the evil teams, having advantage over Carvanhas and Baltoys, but struggling with Zubats and Numels. And the Elite 4 is similarly okay. Grass is fine against the first 2 members, but the 3rd member uses Ice where it once again suffers. There's 2 unevolved Celios, so it's gonna do something here, but it's definitely not going to excel. Now, the 4th member of Emerald's Elite 4 is Drake, who uses Dragon type. And for a lot of people, this is not going to be good for Sceptile, but Sceptile can learn Dragon Claw, and it's arguably one of the best Pokemon to give to. It actually makes really good use of the TM, and I would say it's actually probably its best Elite 4 fight. But what's really weird is the grass starter has an awful matchup to the water champion. And it's kind of just because Wallace is cracked. Wailord, Tentacruel, and Milotic have ice moves. Gyarados, Ludicolo, and Tentacruel neutralize grass with their secondary typing. So all that Sceptile is really good for is one-shotting Whiscash and maybe taking Milotic down to half health. So although there are a lot of good matchups here, Sceptile isn't as good as you would want it to be for quite a few fights. Ultimately though, our ranking system really just comes down to how much benefit do you provide, and comparing that to what are the costs of both time and other investment items. So in a region that's full of water, Sceptile is still going to provide a ton of use. Now, if Sceptile is a Pokemon that is very hit or miss, Hariyama is one I would describe as simply a great all-rounder. Makuhita can be caught before the 2nd gym as high as level 10, and although this is already under-leveled, Makuhita gets Vital Throw at just level 13. And this is important because Makuhita has bad stats and with the low level is gonna have a slow start. Fortunately though, having a 70 base power fighting move at this point in the game is going to do a lot to help that. Regardless though, there is definitely a bit of an investment cost when starting out. And where it really begins to shine is in the Watson fight. Makuhita can evolve just at level 24, and Hariyama is one of the only exceptional performers in this particularly difficult fight. Because of its absurd 144 HP, Hariyama is the only Pokemon that can take more than 2 neutral hits from Manectric and Magneton's Shockwave. And now with 120 attack, it can clap back for massive damage as well. But what makes this line extra neat is that it has the ability Thick Fat, which makes it resist both fire and ice ice attacks. Now, it can also learn Guts, but I think for the context of Gen 3, Thick Fat is a more consistent and overall valuable benefit for this Pokemon. Having 5 resistances on 144 HP with the fighting type is just an overall exceptional build. This makes it a serious threat in the Flannery fight, and of course, as a bulky fighter, it's also extremely useful in the Norman fight. It's great for Dark-type Sydney, Ice Elite 4 Glacia, and the many other Dark types encountered through the evil teams. The line is also a very strong candidate for the Dig and Rock Tomb TM. Plus, its learn moves, Knockoff and Belly Drum, can be quite useful as well. The only real drawback is in its fighting learn set. Vital Throw at level 13 is a great tool to start with, but it never gets anything better. Now, sure, after the 7th gym, you can give it Brick Break, but I ask, is it really worth it for 5 more power? Hariyama's super slow, so it's gonna be going second a lot of the time anyway. But outside of that and its slower starts, it is an overall just great Pokemon. Now, when it comes to the already very difficult task of ranking Pokemon in Emerald, there is nothing harder than deciding where to place Slacking. Some players argue it's the best Pokemon in the entire game, and others find it to be utterly dead weight and are probably mad at me for even including it on this list. And I would actually say that both takes have some truth to them, and I think if we add those takes together, we're going to find a pretty strong middle ground. So let's talk about this very odd Pokemon. To start off, the first stage of this line is Slack Off, and it is just objectively awful. You get it super early in Petalburg Woods, and because it's in the slow experience group, it takes forever to level up. It's also got pitiful stats, matches up terribly against the first 2 gyms, and its truant ability is the icing on a cake of disappointment. Slack Off can only attack every second turn, and so when you factor all of this together, outside of niche utility in Encore and Sleep, this thing might as well be an Abra. And honestly, that's a pretty good way to look at this Pokemon. Terrible start, but we're gonna see it slowly get better and become an absolute monster. Kind of. Now, because Slack Off is so bad, I think the best way to deal with it is just catch it, throw an EXP share on it as soon as you get it, and just don't worry about it until it becomes a Vigoroth. Now, this is relatively doable before the 3rd gym, and at this point you get Vigoroth, which has much better stats and loses its Truant. Now, I should say that even here, we're not really out of the woods, it's just now usable. Vigoroth will mostly be contributing using cuts and low power return for relatively low help through like the actual, bulk of the trainers you're fighting. But in the more serious fights, having access to Yawn and Encore is really good. So it's not going to be a Pokemon you're wanting to run through a lot of the routes because it just landing normal moves. For that reason, you probably still just want to leave the EXP share on it. But with the Vigoroth, you've got a Pokemon that is overall contributing. But eventually, all this grinding, all this experience invested, you will reach level 36, hopefully by Tate and Liza, and you will get a Slacking. Why is this good? Why have you been doing all this work? Well, it's because Slacking has the same base stats as Rayquaza, Kyogre, and Groudon. Now, for anyone that's unfamiliar and is like, what? Basically, it's got legendary stats, but its Truant ability holds it back from being a true legendary because it can only attack every second turn. And despite this maybe seeming like such a huge drawback, in Gen 3, it's actually very good. I mean, you've still got everything we talked about before, access to lightning fast Sleep and Encore, but now you've got like 160 attack, 150 HP, and best of all, this thing can actually make good use of the move Hyper Beam. It's an interesting interaction where the Truant turn and the Hyper Beam recharge turn basically just happen on the same turn, so you get the benefit of a 150 power move plus stab plus 150 attack, and there's really no additional drawback. But there's other neat things you can do as well. You can just land a super strong return or slash, and then on the Truant turn, swap out. People also like to mention that you can use healing items on the Truant turn, and I don't think that this is a leg up for Slacking specifically. Any Pokemon that gets access to a stat boosting move, like say Altaria, is just utterly cracked with healing items. So that's not really a feature that is unique to Slacking. And it doesn't matter because Slacking is on this list for just being really strong. You basically just have this like ridiculously bulky one-shot machine that is kind of slow to use. And I actually think that that is still like the double-edged sword and big drawback of this Pokemon. Slacking, Slack Off, even Vigoroth, they're just annoying to use for a playthrough. Slacking is really good for the major fights in in the game. But in the context of a playthrough, its ability makes for a very slow playstyle. And on top of that, you've also got the massive investment cost just to get it up and running. So I like slacking, it takes number 8, but I just don't agree with the people that say it's the best Pokemon in the game. There are other Pokemon that can give you the exact same outcome as slacking, but with like half the time, and that is always going to be the better Pokemon. And I think pretty interestingly here is up next we have Salamence. Now Salamence is an incredibly strong Pokemon, but it has very late availability. You've got it for just 5 fights, and so the question really is it worth it for 5 fights? So Bagon is found after the 8th gym in Meteor Falls as high as level 35. Being generous and assume you get it at 35 and say not 25, you essentially only have Victory Road to train it. And strapping it with an EXP share will get you somewhere to around level 42. Now, Shelgon doesn't evolve to level 50, so this means you need about an hour of grinding to then actually get Salamence. And again, time investment is a very important factor. You can grind any Pokemon up to level 100 and it will beat the league. So the question is not, can it eventually get good? All Pokemon pretty much can eventually get good. And so I just want to look at like, what is the investment of Salamence getting you? Well, despite only having 5 fights to contribute for, Salamence is genuinely good enough to still make it on this list. It's got monstrous stats, great available TMs, and it's the best user of Intimidate in the whole game, which in and of itself is probably the best ability in the game. Salamence utterly bullies Sydney and Phoebe on stats alone, and even against its 4 times weakness Ginglacia, the ice specialist, it can demolish nearly everything with Brick Break. It's also arguably one of the best Pokemon to deal with Drake's Kingdra, and that is a pretty big achievement. Having a water resistance is also super nice in the champion fight, where it can nicely deal with Whiscash, Ludicolo, and Earthquake, which it definitely makes great use of, also gives it free reign over Wallace's Tentacruel. Salamence is just like so cracked, you can take any team of 5 to the league, and no matter how bad it is, like throw Salamence on and you're probably gonna come out as champion. But again, that doesn't mean it's not without its cost. Those like 2 hours you took to get Salamence could have just been grinded into another Pokemon that you already have, and you could get a very similar outcome. And although it is an utterly dominated 5 fights, it still is only just 5 fights. The way I look at Salamence is if you're gonna have to grind for the Elite Four anyway, you may as well just put that effort towards like the best Pokemon for the league. And so all things considered, Salamence gets a very respectable number 7. It is the first pseudo to make top 10 after all. Now, Manectric is the game's earliest electric type, found just before the 3rd gym. And of course, in a game with so much water, an electric type is very important. This line evolves at just level 26, has very high speed, and a great special attack of 105. This thing is basically slower Sceptile, but if it were an electric type. Now, Manectric is a great party member to have through the end of the game. Note that I'm really stressing the end of the game. See, you can get Electrike before the 3rd gym, but it's not really worth it. This is a point in the game where you are very strapped for XP, and you want to put it into a Pokemon that are helping with the immediate threats of Watson, Flannery, and Norman. Electrike and even Manectric without Thunderbolt are not that good, so overall, I actually think it's a very bad idea to catch this Pokemon as soon as you get access to it. What's interesting though is you can actually catch a Manectric at level 26 just after the 5th gym on Route 118. This is where electric types get really good, and this is the time you should be catching this Pokemon. But very interestingly is this is the exact same point in the game where you can catch Magneton. Magnemite can be found in New Marvel at level 26 after the 5th gym, and it just takes 4 levels to evolve. It has decent defense and a massive 120 special attack and steel typing. Now in Generation 3, Ghost and Dark are ineffective against Steel, and so despite Fairy not existing yet, Magneton has 12 resistances and 1 immunity. That leaves just Water, Fire, Fighting, and Ground to be wary of. To put it not so lightly, this is cracked. Magnemite can just grab the Thunderbolt TM, take 4 easy levels, actually crushing stuff, and then you've just got this monster of a weapon. And honestly, I just think that despite it being slow, it utterly outclasses Manectric. So sure, both are amazing for Team Aqua and the 6th gym. Manectric is overall better for the Tate and Liza fight since it's not weak to Solrock's Flamethrower, but then again, in resisting Psychic, Magneton can wall Lunatone and Xatu to allow for deeper strategies. They then see the same performance against Juan. But it's really in the Elite Four where Magneton just steals the show. The only Pokemon that can hit Magneton for neutral damage on Sydney's team is Crawdaunt, which is the one that Magneton can easily one-shot. The only one that can hit it for neutral on Phoebe's team is her final Dusclops. Glacia's Walrein is the only Pokemon with Surf, so it is again the only thing that can hit it. And then on Drake's team, Magneton just shouldn't be out to fight Flygon or Salamence. And then finally, you've got the Water Champion, which Magneton is of course amazing for. And so really the only drawback is just that Magneton is slow. Manectric is able to fly through the weaker trainers of the game much faster, and I really don't think that should be discounted, but the trade-off is that it isn't near as good for the harder fighting. Manectric may be faster, but like Sceptile, it takes hits really poorly, and this is a game where staying power is extremely important. I feel like you can't talk about Magneton without also talking about Manectric. Look, like higher special attack, 13 resistances, including an immunity, that's just more important than speed. So while Manectric gets an honorable mention, it is Magneton that is taking our number 6 spot. I recently made a video discussing my problems with Emeralds, and in it, I actually had a lot of bad things to say about Blaziken. And a lot of the issues in this came from the fact that there is a direct opportunity cost in using Blaziken, as it means you can't use another Pokemon. But despite that, I think we can still just look at Blaziken's performance and see how it does. Now, the big thing is Blaziken doesn't just have 120 attack, which is a stat that most Pokemon would be jealous of. It's also got 110 special, which in Gen 3 is like almost unheard of. Like for context, Swampert has 85 special, and people are happy to give that thing Ice Beam. Plus, on top of Blaziken's fire and fighting stab, it gets access to Dig, Earthquake, Aerial Ace, Bulk Up, and with this, the line can solo the first gym if evolved, and it provides massive benefits in the next 4 fights. It's great against E4's Sydney and Glacia as well, and also provides a ton of help through the Evil Team segments. Blaziken is just like this incredible all-round fighter that can contribute in any fight that isn't water, psychic, or flying. Unfortunately, that has to be the typing for the last 3 gyms and last 2 E4 members. Now, Blaziken can contribute in the Drake fight, I suppose, but the loss to Steven as champion is really felt on Blaziken. The line also doesn't seem to get the firefighting moves that you would want it to. Sky Uppercut is super light. You're basically just left with Double Kick unless you want to give it Brick Break. I will always give it Brick Break, but it feels bad that I have to give my fighting type a fighting TM. Blaze Kick is not that great. I usually want to opt for either Overheat or Flamethrower. So Blaziken is really good. Outside of what's been discussed, its biggest problems is that not only is it outshadowed by a starter, it's also outshadowed by another fighting type. But up next at number 4, we have Swellow. It might be surprising to see such a weak flyer rank above a pseudo, but I promise Swellow is one of the game's biggest contributors. One of the most notable features of Gen 3's Regional Bird is that it learns Wing Attack at level 13. Many Pokemon in Gen 3 started to see a strong early game stab move. And so fun little fact, this means that at level 13, Tailo has the strongest neutral attack in the game. Now, you could say similar things about like Zigzagoon and Poochyena getting early Headbutt and Bite. You know, they all help you in the early game when you're super vulnerable, but the thing with Tailo is that it holds up and then even gets better. Enter Guts Facade. So there's a neat strategy with this line where if you get one that has the Guts ability, you can pre-poison or burn before a major fight. And this gives it a 1.5 times damage boost to all its moves. Now, Tailo doesn't match up great in the early game gym leaders, but it does guarantee a free Brawly fight. This strategy becomes even stronger after the 5th gym when Swellow gets access to the move Facade. This move doubles in power when the Pokemon is burned or poisoned and stacks with the Guts ability. And this all combined together gives you what is the strongest neutral attacker in the game. People often like to compare Guts Facade Swellow as a nuke. I am generally apt to agree with that. Although there is, of course, a drawback that I think is really important to note. The biggest thing is that people like to act as though Guts Facade is available for Swellow in every single fight. Now, technically it is, but this is such a massive investment cost. Like, you've got to go find a route with the Pokemon that can burn or poison you, actually get it, and then make sure that Swellow isn't dying all the time, because whenever it dies or you go to a Pokemon Center, you got to do it all over again. This is probably a 10-minute process. And that is an investment cost that I don't think a lot of people want to consider. I think the reality for using Swellow is that it's more like you're getting this combo for the gym leaders and most of the Elite Four probably. And even if you do this for every single fight in the game, I mean, that is like 10 minutes times 8 gyms. You know, that actually does start to stack up over time as like a pretty big cost. I would argue that the time is being very well spent, I mean, to literally double Swellow's attack, but I'm just trying to get to the point that I feel like this cost pulls it back from being unanimously the #1 Pokemon in the game. Okay, Swellow, it's a nuke, I get it, it's good, okay, number 5. I'm just saying, I'm sorry, it's not perfect, it's a nuke, there you go, have it. I don't know, that's just a line that is so overused, but let's move on. Fighting is one of the most important types to run in Emerald, and the fighting type that works the best for Emerald is Breloom. Found in Petalburg Woods, Shroomish is a zero investment Pokemon that can solo the first gym. It then is able to provide a ton of benefit in the second fight with both damage and Stun Spore. And finally, just at level 21, it evolves into Breloom and gets fighting type. Oh, and also with that, Mach Punch. Oh, and also 130 attack? That's as much as Kyurem, Ho-Oh, and Garchomp? Now, with all of this together, Breloom makes a wonderful first impression against Watson. You resist electric, outspeed even Watson's Voltorb if you want, and being able to land super effective damage on Magneton is just incredible. Now, it does then suffer in the Fire Gym, but comes back with a vengeance in the normal fight. Winona and the Psychic Twins are also pretty bad, but then once again, it just comes back so hard for one. Like, not only does it resist water, but you've now got Sky Uppercut. It's also great for all of the evil teams, but like Camerupt, and it can also crush Sydney and Glacia. But what brings Breloom above the previous few Pokemon, it's that it is a grass type that is not a grass type. Like, it only has 60 special attack, and its best move is Giga Drain, so this is really only effective against the likes of Whiscash, but that's enough because of the utility that grass provides. How many times have you landed a Sky Uppercut on a water Pokemon, got taken down a bit in your health, and then finish it off with a Giga Drain and like basically heal back up? On top of that, you've got access to both Leech Seed and Stun Spore. So basically, you've just got this incredible physical attacker that resists the most common type in the game and has a ton of utility. And it just takes zero investment. Look, I'm a Breloom lover, but it's because it is just really good. Now, at this point, ladies and gentlemen, I do want to briefly discuss the inclusion of legendaries. Rayquaza can be caught at level 70 in Emerald, and if you use it, it is a free Elite Four and champion. For 0 cost and free 5 fights, that is enough to make it the #2 Pokemon. However, a lot of people don't like it when you count legendaries because it kind of feels like cheating. So if you want to, you can count it here and be happy with that, but we're going to look at 2 other Pokemon because 1, I kind of agree, and 2, it's just way more interesting. But for the #2 spot, we've actually got a tie. In a poll on YouTube, I asked you guys whether you thought Gardevoir or Alakazam was better for a playthrough of Pokemon Emerald. And after 19,000 votes, the poll was perfectly split 50-50. And I'm going to start this discussion by saying that I agree. These Pokemon provide benefit in very different places of the game, but their overall contribution is about the exact same. It's really scary. Right, so first, Ralts technically has a better initial start, as it can start contributing with confusion at just level 6. Abra, on the other hand, is entirely useless baby all the way up to level 16. So Ralts is bad, but it does technically have this marginally better early game. At the point which Abra evolves, however, it's undeniably better than Ralts and Kirlia, up until the point where Kirlia becomes Gardevoir. Level 16 to 30 Kadabra is arguably the best Pokemon for that stretch of the game. It's so fast, it's so strong, it just bullies everything. Like, it doesn't even need the trade evo at this point, it's just cracked. It is so good that whatever marginal benefit Ralts had over Abra is just completely washed away. But it's then, once you get to level 30, where Gardevoir will slowly start clawing its way back through the rest of the game. Alakazam is faster, while Gardevoir is bulkier. And I would say that as a user of just Psychic and Calm Mind, Alakazam probably does it better. The thing that gives Gardevoir its advantage is its access to Thunderbolt. A wise man once said, "Electric types are my favorite type to use in Hoenn, and Gardevoir with Thunderbolt is my favorite electric type." I am apt to agree. I think a slower Gardevoir with Thunderbolt is better than a faster Alakazam without it. Alakazam really is just like a one-trick psychic shotting pony. And so, despite Calm Mind going hard on both of them, I think Gardevoir absolutely takes the late game. And so with that in mind, if you kind of like factor all that together, it's a tie. And there's no docking Alakazam for being a trade evo, other than the time it actually takes to trade. Between Pika Hex and the universal Pokemon randomizing tool that makes it so you can just make a ROM, have trade evos not be a thing, like there is no reason you can't run Alakazam in 2024. And it's also just a Pokemon that is available in the game. So if you don't have access to it or you don't want to run it, then use Gardevoir. But if you're going to compare the actual performances of the two Pokemon, they are tied. It's a tie. Now, next up, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for our very big list of honorable mentions. The first guy we looked at was Manectric, but there are a ton of pretty good, but just not quite enough to make top 10 Pokemon in Emerald. And the next one that I want to look at is Aggron. Steel type in early Pokemon generations inherently bring a ton of value, and the Aeron line is no different. Good attack and crazy defense is nice, but I think this line is a bit overrated. It's got a shallow move pool, low HP, and terrible special defense. Like, this thing has the Gen 1 Rhydon treatment where it doesn't even learn a rock move. On top of the really late evolution and abundance of strong special attackers, like it's awful for Watson and Flannery, like terrible in any water fight. It is a good Pokemon, but not top 10 worthy. Now, a much better steel type is Skarmory. Steel flying is a great type combination, and Skarmory overall has decent enough moves to pair with this awesome defense. Given its defensive style, however, I just think it's more suited for a Nuzlocke. There's just Pokemon that can do what Skarmory does, but much faster. Crobat is another flying type, which is great in Nuzlocks, but just good in regular play. It's got a lot of neat tools like Fast Flinch and Confuse, plus 3-4 times resistances, but they just didn't really give it the late game power that it needs to excel. Of course, another flyer we have to mention is Gyarados. There you go. We mentioned Gyarados. What more do you want from me? And caught around the same time is Tentacruel, which is definitely a top 15, but not a top 10. It's a good water type for the early game. It's got really high special defense. It's really fast, but 80 special is not quite what I want. Oh, what's that? Did you ask me about Starmie? Yeah, Starmie is in fact a much better water type with 100 special and 115 speed. But what's that? Yes, you're right. It also gets access to Thunderbolt, Ice Beam, Surf, and Psychic. Wow. Unfortunately, Starmie isn't available until after the 7th gym, so it's a menace in the league, but that's really it. Wailord and Sharpedo are also two pretty cool late game water pickups. Sharpedo is great for the Psychic gym, and a level 45 Wailmer is arguably the best just free late game add-on you can pick up. Flygon is one Pokemon that I love and do think deserves a mention, but I'm not really that fond of its performance. Like, it's got this pseudo energy, but then you evolve it and it doesn't actually have pseudo energy. It has like starter energy. Like 45 is just way too late for these stats. The fact that it doesn't even learn Earthquake and has to take that up from another team member is really annoying. And sure, moves like Crunch, Flamethrower, Dragon Claw, I guess, are good, but I just think like relying on 80 special with these moves and then getting one shot by Salamance's Dragon Claw, like all that grinding was just not worth it. Now, Golem is a ground type that is probably actually underrated in Gen 3. It's really good for the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th gym, but given its water weakness in the late game, it's just not something you really want. Shedinja is also obviously worth a mention. This thing is one of the best Pokemon in Nuzlocking. For actual playthroughs, it is good to have in the major fights, kind of like Slacking, but in a very different way. I just think that Shedinja's playstyle is very reliant on having and needing other good Pokemon to fill in its gaps. So for that reason, I just don't think it's like top 10 material. The Reggies are also really good for the Elite Four, but they're legendaries, so once again, not gonna count them. And lastly is Zangoose, who actually probably may have made this list, but isn't available in Emerald, so sorry, Zangoose. Now, remember at the start of this video when I was like, hey, we're doing a giveaway for a copy of Pokemon Emerald Legacy? Well, you little patient bird, congratulations, you've made it to that point in the video. Here is how you can enter to get a copy. Sorry, you're not a little patient bird, that was, I don't know. Okay. If you want to enter, all you have to do is be a subscriber of the channel and just comment what you think the most underrated Pokemon in Emerald actually is. Super curious to get a little bit of discussion going on this, so with that said, let's go to our number 1 spot. There is a Pokemon out there that has the advantage over the Rock Gym, Electric Gym, Fire Gym, Flying Gym, Psychic Gym, and Water Gym. It's good for half the evil teams while resisting the other half. It then does great against the first 3 Elite Four members, crushes the 4th Dragon member, and still has enough left over to stomp all over the champion. It does all this, and through the entire game, you only have to worry about getting hit with super effective damage from 4 Pokemon. This Pokemon is so good, it should be spots 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Fortunately, a Pokemon can only take 1 spot, and so it is Swampert that is going to claim the title of best Pokemon in Emerald.